Whenever conservatives talk about the Constitution today, they always start talking about originalism. The idea seems to be that, originalism is part and parcel of the conservative movement going way back, decades. Is that true?
Absolutely not. That became true at some point in the late 70s or maybe early 80s, was hammered home by the Reagan administration and Ed Meese's talks on originalism, and then the Bob Bork confirmation hearings. But if you look back in the 50s and 60s, there were originalists who were Democrats in politics and on the court. There were originalists who were even liberals. You could think maybe of Hugo Black being an originalist. And conservatives used a wide variety of different constitutional approaches. Some of them were proponents of natural law, some of them kind of adopted the process restraint tradition, and some of them adopted originalism. And it's a interesting question how we got from this variety to this unity, how we moved from constitutional interpretation being political to today it's partisan in lots of ways.
Did they see Christianity as part of the Constitution?
So this is just one of the great areas that I need to know much more about. I don't feel comfortable generalizing. I think some of them definitely did, and this ends up being a pathway through which originalism serves to be a coalition-building force for the new right. That it's a method of constitutional interpretation that can appeal to elites like Bob Bork, teaching at Yale, and Raoul Berger, teaching at Harvard, but also makes sense to religious conservatives who see the founders as being religious. Who see the founders as being religious people and founding America on religious principles. And I think that I have so much more to learn about that, but I think that ultimately is going to be a really important part of the story of why originalism is so effective.
So it seems that originalism is answering a bunch of political problems that the right had.
A bunch of political problems and a bunch of intellectual problems as well. This is also it's an elite level discourse that originalism is very effective for, and there's a popular level discourse that originalism is very effective for, and I think it ended up, as people shaped it and developed it, ended up answering a lot of questions for the right all at once.
Now, what happened to the people who in the 50s and 60s were arguing natural law, and then all of a sudden, did they just make a 180-degree pirouette and adopt originalism, or do they stick with their old views? What happened to those folks?
So, again, I have so much more to learn, but I think a lot of them ultimately adopted originalism. They adopted a form of originalism which sees, like I said, this kind of natural law as becoming part of the Constitution. It was constitutionalized by the founders and by the 14th Amendment. There's ongoing research in that area right now about the 14th Amendment. But I'd be afraid to say everyone. It's certainly, we're a historian. There's lots of variety. I'm sure it's not everyone, but many people.
Sure. Now,
those things together.
On the panel, you talked about one person in particular who put out a book on the Warren Revolution, and then he wound up repudiating his own work. Tell me about him.
Yeah, so Brent Bozell writes, he was just with the conservative movement from the very beginning, brother-in-law of William F. Buckley. He writes, helps found the National Review. He works for Barry Goldwater and writes his autobiography, and then writes this originalist work, the Warren Revolution in the 1960s, mid-1960s. Within 2 years, though, he's made a real break from mainstream conservatism, leaves National Review, he founds Triumph, a conservative Catholic magazine, and adopts what he calls Christianist politics, which he interprets as meaning that the Constitution itself should be rejected because it's not a sufficiently Christian document. And so
he starts out as an originalist. And then
leaves.
He leaves that. Wow.
And
that's a pretty serious shift.
It's a big shift. It went through. There's lots. Well, there's not lots, but there's research that other people have done on Bozell and his shift, and he's a fascinating character. But ends up not being so influential towards the modern conservative because he jumps off the train least from national news style conservative.
Thank you.
Thank you.